This is TEDx Islay, Wayne Betts Jr. I have a confession to make. My memory is kind of shaky. I don't really remember much of my childhood growing up. One of the things that helped me to remember things was movies. My mother asked me one time, do you remember when you were 12 or 13, you threw up, we went to that restaurant, you had food poisoning? Don't you remember that song? I'm like, 12? But then when my mom said it was that time we saw Indiana Jones 3 and then we went to the restaurant, I'm like, oh, right, I remember throwing up. So it really depended upon the movie of the time. That's kind of the timeline of my life, is the movies that I saw. You know, my mom would take me to the movies all the time when I was a kid, but there were never captions back then. Do you think that I was bored? No, absolutely not. I was fascinated by lights, camera, action, how the movie would zoom in. It was the different images and the pictures. It didn't depend on the script, but the pictures came together to tell a story. That was really powerful for me. Wow. There's one movie that's burned across my mind, and that is E.T. Come on, how many of you have seen it? Raise your hand. Yeah, I know you all have, right? Exactly. Whew. That's one of the first movies I can remember seeing in the theater. And as a kid, I remember being there with my mom, being so excited. We watched to the very end, and I was crying. It was really touching to me. You know, the movie opening scene. Do you all remember that? The opening scene, okay? It was at night in the woods. There's a UFO with lights coming down and shining through the trees in the woods, and something scurries away. And you see a truck zoom in, and it pulls up. You see the headlights. The door opens. A man walks out, and all you see are the feet. And from his belt, there are keys hanging there. But you never get to see his face. It just focuses on the key. So you don't know who the man is. I don't know. And so he's chasing the animal, and it gets away into the city. And the scene closes, and the story continues. You all know the flying bicycle scene with E.T. And he dies at the end. His body's in the bathroom. And he dies there. The poor boy is just crying over E.T. And then the camera zooms outside to the police and NASA. All these officials pull in that same truck, and you see the feet and the belt and the keychain again. But you never get to see his face. So I don't know who that is. Who's that same picture? But you see that same detail of the keychain from the beginning and the end of the scene. Just from that one detail. And you know that from the story. And from that point on, that's how I knew I wanted to be a movie maker. To take those pictures, put them together. It doesn't depend on the script. It's the images that are powerful. And so that's where I started my journey. And so I entered Gallaudet. I entered a career in filmmaking. There was one professor I had, Facundo, and he was hearing. He couldn't sign. He really struggled. He would tell the interpreter to step aside. He'd try to sign. And, you know, the class had lots of different projects that we had to do. One of them was visual expression. Visual expression. What does that mean? From before that, you know, we'd taken different pictures and worked on telling stories, but he was having a hard time explaining this to the class, what I want you to do for visual expression yourself. You know, for myself, I was looking at him, and, you know, you got to remember, this guy is hearing. And so it was just kind of odd. He was saying about his own perspective. You know, no facial expressions. You know, it was a lawnmower and fire and somebody running and clouds overhead. I didn't understand any of that. It was just odd, his visual expression. Well, he told us it had music and sound in the background, and that's the story of my life. And For your deaf class, I want for you to have your own visual expression. Don't have mine. That's my perspective. What is your perspective? And he really struggled. I could see that he was struggling to find the right words. How do I explain this for them? I don't really know. And so the project was finished. And class, you did a very good job. But I remember that. It was burned across my head. And after Gallaudet, I transferred over to RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and we took different classes in filmmaking about lenses, 50 millimeter or 35 millimeter lenses, and setting up a triad of lights, and all of these different terminology for filmmaking that we had to learn. We had a whole separate course, Grammar of the Film Language. Film language? Film has a specific language. We're not talking about a syllabus that he passed out that was stapled, just a couple of pages. That's not film language. No, there's a book, a really thick book that had hundreds of words. Let me give you an example. Close-up shot, medium shot, wide shot. Okay? Close-up, medium, wide shot. And let me sum those up for you. The feeling that you get when you're telling the story, where is it located at? There's trees and houses and a guy with a cowboy hat. And then a medium shot kind of cuts off his legs. You see the tree, you see the guy there with something in his mouth, and then a close-up shot zooms up right into his face. And that's what shows emotional emphasis in the close-up shot. There's so many different terminologies. There's a Dutch tilt, there's a dolly shot, there's a crane shot, there's hundreds of these different examples. And that didn't really match with me. One term was voiceover or off-screen narration. Films growing up, there's a poor boy that's hungry, and there's a voiceover who's telling the story. His parents abandoned him, and he's in some foreign country, and please send your money to support him. And so there's two different stories. You feel sympathy for the boy, and then there's the voiceover. And so those two things flow together and come together to make one. But deaf films, look at all these hundreds of different things that we include. I mean, really look at that. There's a list that goes on a mile long. But it's not a written script. You introduce the character, and there's conflict, the rising action, continuing conflict, the climax, the resolution, okay, continuing conflict, and then you get to the end of the story. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride, and it has a happy ending. You always have to have a happy ending in American movies. There's all these rules that you have to follow, and they encouraged us to follow these hundreds and hundreds of rules for filmmaking. And with one of my classes and my deaf classmates, I was ready to get in there, I'll roll my sleeves up, follow the rules, incorporate all those things, but I wanted to try to rearrange it for deaf filmmaking. And that was one of the goals. Deaf script in a frame. You see people signing, if their hand gets off screen, you have to cut. You went off out of the frame, you have to do it again. And I didn't really feel like that. I mean, do we have to limit ourselves to sign in such a small space? And so here's one that I made. Right? It's interesting to see 2 points I want to show you. As the audience, freshmen had the lens, they have all these ideas, and you put it together, and you can make a movie. You can. And the audience was shocked and, wow. But for myself, I was sitting in the audience too. I was watching it, and I felt like I'm missing something. didn't feel natural to me. You know, it's not my deaf world. No, that wasn't really an expression of it. That's a different world. Yeah. And, you know, a phone call for the deaf, a telephone, really, that was just my mistake. Why would I include that? I have no idea. And so a struggle just started from there and did different projects trying to follow the rules of film language and rearrange things too. And it took me a while before it became natural. And I wanted to be able to see, yes, that, what I see on the screen, that's my deaf world. So film language, I felt like it was all tied up in this tiny little box. I was struggling to stay within the confines of the rules. And I said, hang on a minute. Let's set that film language aside. And what is my perspective? So we have all these rules. They're all put up together. And the development, you know, hearing people in other countries are the same way. There's always some element of sound that is connected in with the storyline that's in that box. But for me as a deaf person, I'm so visual. I don't think about sound. And so that's where I started to focus. What is my world like? What is my point of view? And how does that apply to making movies? Script. You know, what do I think about script? That's the written words on the page. You know, there's a tree and a house and the characters, and it's all listed down there on the script. And my deaf language, it's American Sign Language. So, yeah, I can write in English. I can write, but I felt like I was struggling. You know, I couldn't sign. There's a Professor Bragg and Bahan Gallaudet. You know, they continue to storytelling. ASL has a script, and it's beautiful, and it's powerful. And that can be the same thing in film language. It really can. But it's not exactly the same for me, because signing shows so much more than what we can have in movies. It goes beyond that, around the corner. What does that really mean? The script. No, we throw that away. An ASL script that tells the story, the movie making. Okay, so this is my first project I worked on for making an ASL script. I hope you don't mind. So the camera zooms in, a wall goes through his face, and you see 6th Street. There are cars going by, there are buildings, there are clouds that come in overhead. Something moves over to the side, this building disintegrates, and we put a new building that pops up. And there's art that comes around, and the different buildings pop up. And so that was my first try, but I didn't do it alone. There were lots of other deaf people that we had. Props and actors, coaches, cameramen, okay? All of these different people came in together. And so we didn't have a written script. Let me show you what we had. Here you go. Yeah, so that's what we made. I have a feeling that's what I want. That's the future. You know, just the signing script, but more visual, a visual expansion. And that's what I want to show you. That's what I want you to understand, the building that pops up by itself. Okay? Can you follow that? Can you follow that? Okay, here's another example of camera flow. You know, editing. You have a camera and somebody's talking, and then it switches over to the next person talking and switches back and forth. And editing, where it shows turn taking. But does ASL happen the same way? One person signs, and then you turn and see the other person signing. Is that how we do it in the real world? We got to stop right here. This is where our limit is. We get up right in each other's faces, or we look at the floor. That doesn't feel natural. You know, we maintain eye contact. Even if we're walking, things go by, we continue, you know, we make that connection. And the camera has to flow with it as well. It has to continue along smoothly. And so I felt in my heart, that's my deaf world. And so I started using more like a body camera so I could walk with it and it would feel the motion. An example is like a Steadicam. You could feel connected with it. So here's an example. Let me show you. So what do you think? You know, the captioning too. It wasn't here at the bottom of the screen. No, I wanted it to be, I didn't want to break the editing and break your point of view. I wanted you to stay connected with the eye contact of the actors. And so I wanted the captions to flow with the actors. And that's my world. That's how I see it. Okay, here's a third example. On-screen narration. You know, we talked about voiceover before. You could hear the sound, and it comes at the top of the screen. But what am I supposed to do with that? Okay, so we have the ASL script. That tells our story. We have camera flow. And this other element, okay, of telling the story, having the words all around. Okay, so I pull the car out of the garage and zoom away. We're driving through, go around the corner, honk the horn, start the engine, start the keys, it revs up, back up, swerve around, the engine's going, and zoom through a red light. Oh, go overhead and go right through, and go around and turn, and we're going through traffic. We're behind one car, and we pass them around. We slam on the brakes and swerve the other way. I open the door, I step out, and where's my wife? Okay, that's just a different way of storytelling. And so we incorporate those three things together. You know, my previous professor said he didn't have a word for that. But here it is, DeafLens. It's like eyes in the back of your head. If I could look into the back of your head and see what you see through your eyes, through that world, the deaf world, I could see it smoothly. And what a new perspective that would have. What does DeafLens mean? We don't have any limits. Okay? And that's what I want you to follow. Thank you so much. Thank you.